What's up, everybody? GeauxBurns, welcoming you to another episode of my Discuss series. Before we get started, a quick note. Next week, we're probably not going to be doing a Discuss video because South Park Fractured But Whole is coming out on Tuesday, and I am planning on live streaming South Park But Whole starting Tuesday. But depending on the length of South Park's new game, Fractured But Whole, I'm possibly going to have to break it up into at least 2 or 3 days of streaming. So there will not be a Discuss video next week. However, in the following week, we will be doing something that's been requested for the past several months now. And stay tuned to the end of this video, and we will go over that following this Discuss episode. So anyways, a few days ago, we had the 1-year anniversary of Mafia 3. It launched October 7th, 2016, and I did a special Mafia 3 1 year later, going over my thoughts, my views, my opinions regarding Mafia 3, from launch October 2016 to a year later. And a lot of you guys, my awesome viewers, subscribers, fans, and fellow Mafia fans as well, chimed in the comment section regarding your opinions, your feedback regarding Mafia 3. And I decided that this was a good idea for a Discuss video because it's possible, I don't know how likely, but it's still possible that Hanger 13 watches my Mafia 3 videos. And if somebody does at Hanger 13, thank you very much. I do appreciate it. And I thought what better way to, get what you guys had to say, pros and cons, up to the forefront and in the spotlight for possibly somebody or everybody at Hanger 13 to have a look at, to go over and maybe talk amongst themselves regarding the future of the Mafia franchise, than to put all of your views and opinions into this video that were posted in the comment section just a few days ago for Mafia 1 year later. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and go over that as well. By the way, you can check out this video. It is in the Mafia 3 playlist. It's also on the channel, so if you are a Mafia 3 fan and you haven't caught that video yet, well, it's up on the channel for your viewing pleasure. Now, this is what we're doing. We're going to go from the top down. I'm going to read over each one, and if I have an opinion, I'll put it out there. I'll try to be as brief as possible. It's probably not going to happen because you know me, I tend to go on and on about my opinions. But we're going to start at the top, and we'll scroll down, and we'll see how this goes. First off, Liam, he has a highlighted comment. I honestly don't know what highlighted comments are. I mean, I understand that I have the ability as the content creator of the channel to pin comments, including usually my comments. But highlighted comments are interesting. But anyways, we're going to start off with his comment. Best story in gaming history. One of the best combat in gaming history. Shittiest gameplay. One word, repetitive. And this is going to be a word you're going to see a lot, most likely, in the comment section. Repetitive. Now, let us continue with some people that replied to my comment when I asked everybody, what's your opinion, your thoughts regarding Mafia 3 1 year later? And Robin thought that it's much better. And that was the premise of the video, was that yes, when Mafia 3 launched October 7th, there were obviously problems. And it seems very apparent that the game was rushed out the door by Take-Two. When honestly, Hanger 13 should have been given a few more months to finish the game, to polish it, to fix the bugs, glitches, issues. But they did ultimately fix it, and they did add a lot of content to it, free and expanded. And in my opinion, I agree with Robin. It's much better than it was at launch a year ago. Next, we move on to Unknown Assassin, a.k.a. Faya. This is what he has to say. I felt like Hanger 13 was given a lower budget than what Mafia 2 had for Mafia 3. After all, Hanger 13 was a brand new studio, 2K Czech was restructuring, and Mafia 2 sort of had poor sales, so it would make sense as to why the game wouldn't have had a bigger budget. However, 1 year later, the game has somewhat improved, just not nowhere near as great as Mafia 2. And Antonio says that we still need a Vito DLC. So yes, a lot of people were really hoping that we were going to get more from Vito in Mafia 3, including possibly an expansion revolved around Vito and Lincoln. That would have been awesome if that was the case, or perhaps even like a prequel to Mafia 3 in which, Vito is, just got to New Bordeaux and, having to deal with the fallout from what happened in Mafia 2, as well as going under the graces of Sal Marcano. As slowly but surely, he gets to size him up and decide where he is, where his place is, and, how they butt heads. It would be interesting if there was ever a future Mafia game that, once again, focused on Vito Scaletta as the main protagonist, whether it's a sequel to Mafia 3 or, like I said, set somewhere in between Mafia 2 and Mafia 3. But I agree, I wish that we would have had more time with Vito in Mafia 3. So back to what Unknown Assassin is talking about budget-wise, I can imagine that, compared to, say, games like Grand Theft Auto 5 or Star Wars Battlefront 2, which I did the beta over the weekend. You guys may have noticed that over on the right side. Apparently, the budget for EA DICE for Battlefront 2 was huge. It was massive, hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. So I get the feeling that, Hangar 13, like Unknown Assassin said, they probably didn't have that much money compared to some of the other developers out there to make Mafia 3. So the budget could have been a major reason why Mafia 3 didn't end up as good as a lot of us were hoping. But at the same time, they spent a lot of money in marketing the game, from the cinematic trailers to all the marketing stuff like the fake newspapers, postcards, everything else they did. Even at E3, they had this massive setup. They had this entire area that looked like a mock-up of the French Ward, a.k.a. the French Quarter. So, yeah, Take-Two did spend a great deal amount of money on the marketing campaign, as well as a live-action trailer. And they even got Ice Cube to do a song, and that was featured. So they did spend a lot of money on marketing. So you can imagine that they probably spent even more money on the game itself. But at the same time, Hangar 13, being a new studio, probably didn't get as much money to work with when it came to the development of Mafia 3. And now we're moving on to Sedan, who obviously has at least one or two things to say, as usual. A year after launch, the game has not set well with me. Issues in my personal life made me focus on Mafia 3 as the only major positive thing I had to look forward to at the time. A year later, I can finally step back and truly be honest. Mafia 3 did a lot of things right, but it's honestly a disappointment to me. I haven't touched the game since the beginning of August. For all the good things in the game, the negatives of blurry, fuzzy, daytime graphics, a lack of real customization, not a lot of variety in clothing, and only a limited number of cars, there's only so much you can do. I played Mafia 1 and 2 in the months since I stopped playing after beating Stones Unturned. I wish they would have stuck with the game and released some additional content like style packs. They really would have done a lot to add more customization options. It would have kept the game and community alive. Right now, Mafia 3 is pretty much dead, while games like Mafia 1, City of Lost Heaven, and Mafia 2 maintain loyal followings. By the way, for all the loyal fans of Mafia, City of Lost Heaven, and Mafia 2, I have playlists. And I'm continuing to Let's Play new episodes of Mafia, the City of Lost Heaven on Fridays. I just thought I'd throw a plug in there, Alright, so continuing. Mafia 3 just doesn't resonate with a lot of Mafia fans, and the more casual newcomers to the series walked away when the next game came along. Knowing now what Mafia 3 is, my suggestions would have been for Hangar 13 to give us more time with all the characters. They're well written and expertly acted, but we don't get to see them enough. More customization also would have gone a long way to making the game more fun. Mafia 2 didn't have some crazy customization system, but it was enough to give you the option to dress up or dress down if you cared about that sort of thing. I also would have recommended splitting the songs across additional station or two to help cut down the songs repeating so frequently. And finally, the daytime filters are BS. The city is gorgeous, but during the day, it isn't even given time to shine. The nighttime of the game looks amazing, especially with some rain, and I wish I could set the entire game to take place at night. I also would have added some more world interaction, allowing us to buy some booze from a liquor store, new clothes from the tailor, food from a restaurant, outfit your safe house with a department store, buy guns, upgrades from a legit gun store with a gunsmith, etc. There was so much they could have done to make the open world much more fun to play with. At the same time, I do understand the point of view of why they had Jackie as the go-to guy for all the guns and ammo and various upgrades because of the fact that Lincoln Clay was African American. This was in the South in the late 60s, and there was always this fear of allowing African Americans to own firearms. So I kind of see why they went that angle. Plus, a lot of the firearms that Lincoln Clay was getting his hands on, including grenades and Molotov cocktails, you couldn't exactly get at a normal gun store anyways. Continuing, my biggest hope is that Mafia 4 can basically be Mafia 2 with some sort of open world missions from Mafia 3. I'm voting late 70s Vegas, focusing on Italian mob once again. I want to wear suits and drive a big Cadillac Eldorado. There's a lot that could be done to combine the best of both games. All right, so this goes back and forth actually between him and Young Knight. So I'm going to go ahead and read this as well because, like I said, I really do hope that somebody at Hangar 13 actually watches my videos, and if they do, maybe some pointers in here from people's opinions that are obviously fans of the Mafia franchise that played Mafia 3, voicing the positives and the negatives will actually be something that resonates with the developers at Hangar 13. At least that's my hope from this video. Overall, I really did enjoy this conversation whenever I read over it. So here's Young Knight first replying to Sedan. I can understand that, honestly, I really like Mafia 3, to be honest. It's a fun game, in my opinion, the combat, so I don't mind that the missions and rackets. I like the story and the characters. The atmosphere is beautiful, and the soundtrack is great. Driving around the city, listening to music, I was like, this is Mafia. However, I feel a lot of the potential wasn't reached, sadly. I'm not talking about the Italian Mafia perspective that we didn't get to play a made man. I like playing it from a different perspective, as did I. And you still were involved in organized crime. The potential I'm talking about is the gameplay. The open world is sadly empty and inconsistent. There isn't much to do in this city, which sucks because this is a game I want to go back to and explore. The technical issues are a massive turnoff for people, and it gets in the way of enjoyment along with the weak AI. The way that missions are structured was a major problem, and they should have found a way to make it less repetitive. Also, mechanics, I feel, could have been fleshed out better. This game clearly needed more time for development and improvement on its gameplay. I don't get why Take-Two or 2K would have wanted to rush this game out, or why Rockstar gets more time than these guys. They know taking their time benefits the game and sells, so I don't know what was on their mind. Okay, so the difference is, all right, Take-Two is the publisher. They're at the very top. 2K is just another development house along with Hangar 13 and Rockstar. Those are the development houses under Take-Two. The difference is Rockstar is so successful, so massive with their various franchises like Grand Theft Auto and Red Dead that they have a lot more say, a lot more authority, a lot more pull as to whenever they decide that a new game comes out, because the heads of Take-Two are smart enough to realize that most of the time when Rockstar comes out with a game, it's a guaranteed moneymaker for them. Now with Hangar 13, it was a brand new company, a brand new development house, so they probably didn't have as much say or control over when a certain game was going to be released. Like their very first game, Mafia 3. They had to get it out by the deadline, for better or worse. They had no choice. The deadline was probably agreed upon by the heads of Hangar 13 and by Take-Two. They all believed that they could get the game ready to go by, fall 2016. And there were issues, but at the same time, no delays. They got the game out, especially with the heavy promotion that began in the spring, starting in April, leading up to E3. They kind of had no choice, I feel, but to have gotten the game out a year ago in October of 2016. I wish that it would have been delayed a few months, Young Knight, but obviously it was not. So I think that's the difference. Hangar 13 just doesn't have as much pull or say or autonomy as Rockstar does. Continuing, it's a shame this game got bad reviews because I really wanted this game to prove the haters wrong, because they were basically hating this game just because you didn't play a main man. But the real issue was its gameplay, open world, and technical side, where this game is struggling. I wish they had mod tools as well. All right, so let's go and read Sedan's first reply. And by the way, I love this in the comment section whenever I see 2 or 3 of my subscribers having a dialogue, just having a conversation about this or that. And not all the time, but every now and then I will, chime in as well. But most of the time I just like sitting back and just watching people have a discussion. It's really cool to see this. And that's one thing I love about my community. Sedan replies to Young Knight, don't get me wrong, I do like the game, but it isn't the same league as the first 2 games in the series. And I think that, like I mentioned in my 1 year later video, that was already going to be a huge bar for Hangar 13 regarding Mafia 3 because, you know, Mafia in the City of Lost Heaven and Mafia 2 were so well received. So at the moment, it was very, very difficult going in hoping that game was going to make it to that same level. It's kind of like how good Batman Begins and The Dark Knight were. It was very difficult for Christopher Nolan and his team, even though they were behind the first 2 movies, to make a third movie that was going to make it to that level. And sadly, you know, Dark Knight Rises didn't. But it would have been even worse if it wasn't Christopher Nolan, if it was an entirely new team of people and only maybe a few people from the previous 2 movies. That's kind of like a really high bar right there when it comes to the Mafia franchise. Continuing, the story and core gameplay mechanics were quite good, but there were some small improvements that could have gone a long way in making the game get close to the level of Mafia 1 and 2. If Hangar 13 had listened to our criticisms and addressed them in DLCs, we could have had a very different situation on our hands. I bought Battlefield 1 a couple weeks after Mafia 3, and it's arguably, you know, had far less content than Mafia at launch. However, Battlefield 1 has remained a game that I enjoy playing at least once every week or 2 because it offers infinitely variable combat situations. As much as I hate the expression, there's only so many ways to skin a cat. And you better not try and skin any of my cats, or you and I, Sedan, are going to go outside. Yeah, okay. And that's the case with Mafia 3. I liked Lincoln as a protagonist, and I think his story tied in nicely with organized crime, but I think the future entries need to go back to the old formula. Much like GB had said regarding Grand Theft Auto 5 and multiple protagonists, lightning can only strike once. The further they stray away from the made-man player characters, the further the series goes from its roots. So I agree. I think that the next Mafia game, whether it's a prequel or sequel to Mafia 3, should go back to being about, you know, the same formula of Mafia, the City of Lost Heaven, and Mafia 2, you know, a made man, you know, style. I think I agree with you guys regarding that because, I mean, I think Lincoln Clay worked. I did like the different perspective, but at the same time, I just don't think it would work again. I could be wrong about that, but I just feel like that they did it. It was different. It was cool they tried something different. It was bold, but for the next Mafia game, I think a lot of us want to go back to a traditional Mafia type game, you know, playing a young Italian-American or Sicilian from a poor family, or maybe even a member of a mob already. Maybe, you know, the son to a Don or one of the Don's son, like in The Godfather, and maybe he doesn't want to be a mobster, but situations occur that kind of force him into the life. So maybe they could go like with a Godfather angle. That would be kind of cool. Before we continue, I know some of you are probably like, GeauxBurns, why don't you just quickly read over these and move on? We get it that, you know, Young Knight and Sedan had a conversation, but it's a very important conversation, and it's a conversation that I hope that the developers at Hangar 13 have had or will have, you know, regarding the next Mafia game. So I think they both brought good points, and that's why I'm giving them to a few minutes, but I will move on to everyone else's comments in just a moment. So please bear with me. Young Knight replies, I do wish that they had seen the criticism and improved the game and added more to the city. I feel like the DLC was a step in the right direction in a way, but not completely. For me, I liked Mafia 3 more than Grand Theft Auto 5 because it felt like an actual crime story. I just want this series to improve on its open world aspect. It's fine to focus on story, but you're gonna, you know, make your game open world, make it strong. So you see 2 points of view, whereas you have Sedan, who really loved the story aspect of Mafia 2 and Mafia, the City of Lost Heaven. You have Young Knight, who enjoys that as well, but he also wants the open worldness that, you know, was promised with Mafia 3, but didn't exactly live up to the promise. So it's kind of like taking 2 things and trying to put it together and make it work. You know, 2 separate things like mac and cheese and a burger. You know, it can work because, you know, I've had a few mac and cheese burgers in my time, but it may not work. So anyways, continuing with the Sedan's reply. Like I've said for 7 years now, my dream game would be Mafia 2 with a more open world components, like being able to purchase a safe house around the city, acquire cars legally, being made able to take stake in the rackets which you have and manage, etc. Basically, Mafia 2 with the open world of Godfather or Scarface games. It would have been brilliant. Mafia 3 was a step in the right direction in some respects, in the wrong direction for others. And like I said, this is what inspired me to make this a discussed video, what I said to these guys. Hopefully someone at Hangar 13 is reading over the fans' comments, taking notes, and uses the feedback, for the next Mafia game. And I felt like that it's possible because developers are so busy that maybe they'll only have time to watch a video, if they even do that. So my hope is to take it, the next level and just take all your comments, your suggestions, your pros, your cons, your critiques, and make that a video, hopefully for them to watch. That was the plan, the hope, the dream, right? At least I'm trying, All right, so anyways, back to Young Knight. So he had his own comment, his own thoughts, besides replying to Saddam. Young Knight said this: I enjoyed the game, although right now I'm not able to buy the DLC. Well, I hope that eventually you're able to purchase the DLC. I know it's not cheap, but hopefully there'll be a sale for it somewhere down the road and you'll be able to buy it, because in my opinion, the 3 expansions were each awesome in their own separate way. I like the story, the characters, the atmosphere. I like the driving gunplay, the music, and even the art design and open world. The thing that sucks is that it's hard to actually recommend it to people because there are problems with the gameplay, such as mission structure. It's incomplete, empty, and inconsistent open world. The AI and technical issues, stuff like that, really drag the game down for people, and it's some of the most important parts of an open world game. I wish they built on Mafia 2, having those small details, but have more to do. People will say Mafia 2's game design was on the story, not the open world. I get it's important to have a good story, but that shouldn't be an excuse for a weak open world. Its game felt unfinished, but well polished, where this game feels unfinished, but not fully polished. There's a lot of rough edges, which is frustrating. And for everybody that's a fan of the Mafia franchise that had high hopes for Mafia 3, that spent $60 on the game, I definitely sympathize. Next, we're moving on to Nathan. Great video. All the obvious complaints people still have that were reviewed. The team did a tremendous job at improving everything they could within the time frame. And I agree entirely, Nathan. And I want to say that right now to anyone at Hangar 13. This video is not intended to bash any of you. I know you guys put a lot of hard work, weeks, months, years into this game. All this video is for is in the hopes that, the feedback from the fans, at least my subscribers, will help towards a future Mafia game. Whether you're working on it right now or you're going to do it somewhere down the road. I honestly don't know what Hangar 13 is working on right now, but hopefully the feedback is being received by everybody at Hangar 13. They're looking over the notes. They're jotting down the things that did right, the mistakes that were made, and the fact that that was their very first game that they made as Hangar 13, and that they will learn, what works and what doesn't work going forward. Moving on to Carletto. Of all the things I wish were in Mafia 3, I'd like to point out the ability to have another save file for how simple it is, like which open world game doesn't have multiple save files. Exactly. That's exactly what I was saying in the video. I mean, I really wish that they had multiple save files. It's pathetic, taken lazy to a whole other level. And of course, CJ agreed. Yes, would have loved different save files. Had to restart several times just to replay. I would have also liked the classic tickets, being pulled over from the cops along with gas stations, even if you never had to get gas, but it would have just been cosmetic or for fun. And CJ, I disagree with you. But to each their own. The reason why I feel that way is obvious from my recent Let's Play of Mafia, the City of Lost Heaven, which I've had more of a difficulty with the cops than I did in Mafia 2 for some reason. I don't know. But anyways, moving on. Mr. Assassin. I got this in January for £25. The story was decent and it got repetitive, but kind of fun. The shooting was great. It's just needing more polishing and a better story. I'm curious to see what Mafia 4 has to offer. 1980s Miami is where I'd want to go, kind of like Scarface, I suppose. I want to see how an online mode would work, something like Grand Theft Auto 5. And that's something that a lot of the Mafia community is kind of like on the fence about, or on one side or the other. Like, a lot of people just want to focus on story, single player, on just the story itself. Because there's so many other online games out there. I sympathize with that point of view. However, as most of you know, online gaming is where it's at right now. And, the publishers are all about making money, and they're encouraging developers to make online versions of games. There's a rumor that there's going to be an online version of Fallout, which is probably true because there is an online version of Elder Scrolls. It wouldn't surprise me if there is some, push, some desire from Take-Two, and possibly even Hangar 13 for a Mafia online game. But that's not what we're talking about right now. We're talking about a future sequel or prequel to Mafia 3, hopefully focused predominantly around a story, a setting, an era, whether it's the 80s in Miami, like Mr. Assassin once, or like 70s in Vegas or Atlantic City, something like that. Next, we're going to K because I don't know how to pronounce that. I'm sorry, but I'm not even going to try. I would just butcher it. Okay, so this is what K has to say. A southern black guy who just got back from Vietnam, Black Ops, fights mafia, clansmen, and cultists in an open-world game, which is enjoyable only at shootouts and boss battles. It felt like it could have been a great game if it had imitated Max Payne and not Grand Theft Auto. And CJ loves the Max Payne comparison. So obviously most games are in a way influenced by other games. It's just a reality we live in now. There isn't really much room for originality anymore. And, that's an interesting take by Kay, is that maybe, Mafia 3 would have been better served if, they would have focused on some of the Max Payne elements and less on Grand Theft Auto. But, that's just something that everyone's going to have a different opinion on. Next, we go to Sir Galloway. Good video, bro. I love the game, but I've not played it in a while. I still play it sometimes, and I would say it has improved since launch. DJ Singh says this, same, I loved it, but I think it was rushed, to be honest. These days buying games one day has been rough for me. Example, day one, bugs, patches, etc. I think we should wait until the game comes out with reviews, like Mafia 2 story. It's still the best one. Moving on to Sharif, this is what he has to say. Mafia 2 is still my go-to Mafia game, and in my opinion, the best game in the franchise. I played all 3 Mafia games, and I can tell you that Mafia 2 is perhaps the most balanced and well-rounded game. To me, Mafia 2 has the best story, the best characters, and some of the best gameplay throughout the whole series. The first game is fun, but it's aged horribly, and at times it can be extremely tedious and just very frustrating to play. Believe me, Sharif, I know. Yes, I do. The third game has the best combat and the best soundtrack in the series and has an extremely well-made story with terrific voice acting and writing. Mafia 2 is brilliant. The cars are great, the soundtrack is great, the setting is beautiful, and the combat is really good. Mafia 2 probably has not just the best story in the franchise, but among some of the best stories in any game. The characters really resonate with me, and I connected with Vito. It doesn't shy away from depicting how Mafia really is like, veneered with oaths, codes of honor, but deep down still a band of violent and dishonest thugs hiding behind sharp suits. The game also depicts the time quite well, too. It captures the mood of the late 1940s and early 1950s America so well. The fact that 45 segments of the game is set in dreary winter compared to the colorful summer of early 50s is a great contrast, whether intentional or not. And I think it is intentional. I think that the fact that you still had this World War raging and, the mood of not only America but the rest of the world fighting the axis of evil, the Nazis, as well as the Empire of Japan and the fascists of Italy, it was dark because they were losing brothers and sons and husbands on those foreign battlefields in this terrible war. And, the fact that, the 50s felt more of a promise because we got past that. I mean, yes, we had issues with the Soviet Union, new problems rising with the Korean War, but at the same time, there was this optimism that existed post-World War II that hopefully, just hopefully, this would be the last World War that we would ever seen, and maybe the last war period, but that did not happen. Continuing, between the gloomy mood and the war-committed American nation whose sons are serving abroad in a barbaric, uncivilized war, and the optimistic post-war attitude of the country with its renewed interest in consumption and hedonism. Okay, so see, we agree for the most part, regarding what we both just said there. Continuing, it even depicts the darker side of this time, not shying away from the themes of racism, xenophobia as well. The tale of Vito Scaletta and how he falls into organization is so well executed. All the characters in the game are lovable and so memorable, except for Derek. Screw Derek. This is helped greatly by the game's stellar voice acting. The entire story of the game is really original and tense. It gets particularly tense during the end of the game when the series of events transpiring lead to Vito and company engaging in activities not approved by the organization and the death of one of his pals. What I basically want to say is that Mafia 2's story is one of the best games ever, and that this game for me will always be the best in the series. It's hard to put words into how good a story is, and I tried my best, but I couldn't capture truly how magnificent it was. It's something that truly needs to be experienced. I'm going to be completely honest with you, Sharif. I think you did a good job there, so golf clap for you. Golf clap. There you go. I agree. I mean, yeah, and I think that what you have to say regarding Mafia 2 should also be listened to by Hangar 13 regarding all these comments, views, and opinions for Mafia 3, because a lot of people really loved, a lot of the elements that Mafia 2 had. They took, things that were introduced in Mafia 1, Mafia the City of Lost Heaven, and they improved upon it. And hopefully that will be the case with Mafia 4, or Mafia prequel, or Mafia reboot, or whatever they're planning to do in the Mafia franchise, that they will just take the best of these games, the best of Mafia City of Lost Heaven, the best of Mafia 2, the best of Mafia 3, and make an even better Mafia 4, or Mafia, sequel, prequel. Next, let us move on to CJ. He had a few things to say. I didn't know that Nolan North was Remy Duvall. Interesting. Nolan North and Troy Baker are everywhere these days. All right, so continuing with what he had to say. If and when we get a sequel, I would love to see Donovan come back in some form, maybe as a grizzled, half-crazy ex-CIA agent still hunting down JFK conspirators. There's just so many great locations to use. I love Mafia 3. It had its problems, but it was a fun game, and I got my money's worth. Hell, Joey Diaz is in it, and I can grow some weed, which possibly makes it the best game ever. So yeah, obviously there's a lot of things that people loved about Mafia 3. And I feel like if they brought Donovan back, I don't know if it would work without Lincoln Clay as well. What would work, as I mentioned in a Discuss video several months ago, after Stones Unturned came out, was kind of like a spin-off game set in Vietnam. Set around another game that's kind of set on the shelf, also done, under Take-Two umbrella and 2K Czech, Viet Cong. So they could just, move Lincoln Clay and Donovan into the past during those 4 years they were serving together in Viet Cong. I meant Vietnam, not Viet Cong. Viet Cong is the name of the game, but the war was in Vietnam. Anyways, moving on to Lane. Can't believe it's been a year already. Back when Mafia 3 was announced, I was excited being a fan of Mafia series. I couldn't wait to see how it would pay out. It had to be one of the most anticipated games of the year. Once October 7th came, I popped the game in and spent all night playing through the campaign. Mafia 3 had a lot of flaws from the beginning, a vast amount of glitches, only one save file, repetitive gameplay, a small selection of vehicles that we could obtain, no character customization until they brought it out later, but it's not the same way that you could in Mafia 2, going into shops and buying outfits, etc. But the story was one that you could grasp to. Looking back at previous Mafia titles had the same repetitiveness, but the story was always what shone through, which was essentially the core of the game. Through its hiccups, in the end, Mafia 3 was a good game and depicted what Hangar 13 wanted to bring to the audience, but in my opinion, it could have been delayed for a little while longer. All in all though, Mafia 3 might not have reached my full expectations, I still enjoyed playing through it and had a blast with the DLC. If there will be a future Mafia sequel or prequel, I hope it reflects on this one and improves on what Mafia 3 lacked. I agree entirely, Elaine. Absolutely. And finally, we go to Romero. He says, guess we'll have to wait for Mafia 4 until the PS5 or Xbox 2 comes out. Okay, so anyways, I just want to thank everybody for always watching my videos and liking my videos, because the likes really do help the channel. Even dislikes help the channel, believe it or not. So if you didn't like the video, I wouldn't dislike it because it's basically the same thing as liking it, in case you were wondering. But at the same time, one thing I do enjoy is the fact that there's such a passionate community revolved around this franchise, Mafia, all the way back, from 2002 when the first game came out. Mafia: The City of Lost Heaven. Once again, I'm going through Let's Playing. It's been a long time since I played that game, and so there's a lot of rust. But I'm enjoying it, even if there are moments where I have a lot of salt. A lot of salt. And by the way, I did Let's Play Mafia 2 as well. But that was, spring of last year, and it was a pretty difficult time for me. But it was Mafia 2 that really got me through that dark period in September. My dad passed away, and, if it wasn't for me focusing on Mafia 2, it would have been harder to have made it to October because, it's just what kept me going, making it through that moment of my life, losing my dad to cancer, focusing on video games. So I have to thank, the Mafia franchise for that, because my focus on Mafia 2, then my focus on Mafia 3 when it launched in October. Yeah, I mean, it allowed me to get through that dark period a year ago. And overall, I think I've pretty much said everything I need to say about Mafia 3 in various videos. I don't need to repeat myself any further. I feel like a damn parrot if I did. And a lot of what you guys say, I agree with entirely. And even if I disagree with you, I still wanted to put your opinion out there for the developers at Hangar 13 to watch and to look over. And hopefully take notes and, with an open mind, and hopefully not take it as a complete bashing or ripping of Mafia 3. We're not trying to do that. What I am trying to do is, get your information, your thoughts, your feedback regarding your opinion about Mafia 3 a year later after launch to the developers. So they can look at this. They can put it all on the table. And they can say, okay, this is what they liked. This is what they didn't like. This is what they would like to see in a future Mafia game. In the hopes that maybe, just maybe, the next Mafia game, whether it's a prequel or sequel, will not only live up to our expectations, but perhaps, just perhaps, exceed them as well. Okay, with that out of the way, let's do this. Alright, so as promised many, many months ago, we did a thing called Reverse Q&A. And it's my opportunity to ask my subscribers 3 questions. And shout out to Jay Brown, a.k.a. Sedan, who gave me some suggestions. And we're just going to go with that. And yes, I kept the email, Sedan. I did. All right, so these are the 3 I'm going to pick from, your recommendations for Reverse Q&A 2.0. All right, dream job. What would be your dream job? What is your favorite season of the year? And video game you would like to see remade. You can answer one or all 3 of these questions for Reverse Q&A 2.0. Once again, dream job, as well as favorite season of the year, and video game you would like to see remade or remastered, rebooted. One or all 3 of those questions. Feel free and leave your responses below in the comment section via Twitter or Facebook. And you have till this coming Friday, which is Friday the 13th, in order to submit your answer or your answers to my Reverse Q&A 2.0 questions. Bear in mind, this video will not go out Wednesday. It will go out probably the next Wednesday or maybe Thursday, or it'll go out eventually. Reverse Q&A 2.0. But next week it's all about South Park Fractured Butthole. So that's what we'll be live streaming starting Tuesday. And it possibly might lead into Wednesday as well as Thursday. We'll just see what the future holds for us. But fear not, before the end of the month, we will have Reverse Q&A 2.0. Perhaps even in time for Halloween.